call in Steve, and not having luck right now, so I'm going to try to one more time and see if I can get him in. We may just need to go with, if you don't mind doing your presentation. Again, I can apologize about the technical difficulties we've had, but I may just have you discuss, since we're already into this. Go ahead, and if you can talk to us about the experiences you've had, some of the work that you've done. I had an introduction, so essentially I was going to introduce my three speakers, and right now we've only got Jason Reimuller on. He is a research scientist with the Space Science Institute and the president of Integrated Spaceflight Services. He's the principal investigator for the Project PoSSUM, the Polar Suborbital Science in the Upper Mesosphere, studying polar mesosphere and noctilucent cloud structures using manned reusable launch vehicles. He's also the author of Spaceflight Egress and Rescue Operations. So, Jason, I'm going to go ahead and have you discuss some of the things that you've done and some of the experiences you've got. And go ahead and, if you don't mind presenting now, and we'll at least have this recorded and we can proceed with displaying this to others in the future. Hopefully we'll be able to edit some of the earlier stuff out. So please, Jason, if you'll tell us about some of your experiences working in the microgravity field and some of the work that you've been doing.
Sure, Tanya. So just get an idea of who's online here now. No, we don't have quite the attendance that we were anticipating.
No, most of the folks that are going to be online are going to be fellow researchers that are interested in pursuing microgravity science and experiments. Currently, I don't know exactly who's on, so if you don't mind just talking a little bit about some of the things that you've done, and we're recording this, and so we'll be able to hopefully edit it and broadcast it on YouTube in a future forum.
Okay, thanks, Tanya. Well, as you had, thanks for the introduction. So. My research has been mostly in mesospheric science and noctilucent cloud structures, which are somewhat of an elusive space cloud. It was a focus of my own dissertation, and Project PoSSUM, which is, like you said, polar suborbital science in the Upper Mesosphere, was born from that initial project. And that project was the initial dissertation was an airborne research project where we took a small plane, I flew it up to the Northwest Territories in northern Canada, and flew synchronous with a satellite that was looking at these very high altitude space clouds. So these are clouds that stratify about 83 kilometers high. It's amazing that the air is only 1/100th of 100,000th the density of sea level. So it's amazing you can even see anything, but it's a very dynamic part of the atmosphere, and it's of interest to a lot of different groups. So Project PoSSUM started initially in about 3 years ago, and we put a proposal, we being Dave Fritz and Gary Thomas and I, to the NASA Flight Opportunities Program, which was accepted. And it was an experiment to basically take the same kind of commercial off-the-shelf cameras and use a reusable suborbital launch vehicle. We proposed the X-Core Lynx for this, to actually do a tomography experiment, launch into Lynx and actually kind of somersault over a noctilucent cloud in a way that we could build tomography, much like an MRI would scan a person and build a 3D representation of a person's body. So would we do with this cloud layer, and this cloud layer is really the best observable of the upper atmosphere. So that was accepted. We realized that the program really needed a lot more to get the science out. And so the Flight Opportunities is a publicly funded, it's a NASA program that provides assistance to mature space technologies. But we had the technologies we needed to mature, but really what we needed was a complicated deployment, taking a vehicle like the Lynx to a high latitude spaceport where we could see the clouds, and we didn't know when the clouds would show up, so we'd have to go up there and wait. So all of a sudden, instead of a simple flight, we had a complicated deployment chasing something that couldn't be predicted. So we'd have to go up there in the height of the season and wait, which can be expensive. So this was so the challenge grew, and we realized that the experiment really was a science experiment that was beyond the scope of the technology of the Flight Opportunities Program. So we grew this program from to try to find a way that we could support a deployment to a high latitude spaceport. And so we looked at into private funding opportunities, and we looked into sponsorships and media, and then we expanded this to get to bring in more people that would have an interest in especially high latitude astronomy,
Mm-hmm.
to organize the community from that, not just of scientists, but of people that would want to train and be a part of this, to fly as part of this mission. And from that, we have a wonderful partnership now with Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and we just completed our first uh, qualification program for scientist astronauts. So that's one thing that's very unique about PoSSUM, is that it's intrinsically a manned experiment. It's a bit of an art because you don't really know, you have a very limited time, and you have to identify specific structures that can tell us the most about mesospheric dynamics while manipulating a number of instruments. So it's nothing that really leads itself to automation, but it's an experiment that's being enabled by these new technologies, these suborbital launch vehicles, even high altitude balloons as well. So PoSSUM has grown from a single experiment that was funded publicly to a sustaining program that has a very strong education and public outreach component. And a lot of this comes from the story. It's the story of these elusive clouds you have to chase, but also the human elements, the human in the loop, training people to do real science. And that's something that this NewSpace, this community, lacks. And the tourism aspect is being pushed, but really the sustaining market, this great opportunity to do science. That's what PoSSUM has grown to become. So, why do we care about noctilucent clouds? What's special about these space clouds? There are several communities that have significant interest in these. One of the strongest uh, advocates of this research is global climate change.
Mm-hmm.
So we believe that specifically the man-made changes in our environment reflect themselves by the trends that we're observing in these clouds. So the first observations of these clouds, recorded observations, was 1885.
Hmm.
We there have been we think that that's the first time that they really have formed, because the Arctic cultures have been historically, they've documented uh, their observations very well. The aurora activity has been incredibly well documented through Arctic nations around the globe. Yet no mention has ever been made of these clouds until 1885, and now, especially in the last 40 or 50 years, we've been observing very significant changes in these clouds and the trends. They've been coming to lower latitudes. They've been becoming more intense in observations. Um, they're getting stronger, essentially. The season is expanding. So we ask why. Well, the hypothesis is that it's being driven by man-made drivers of global climate, specifically carbon dioxide and methane. We know in the upper atmosphere, methane photodisassociates to water vapor, and uh, carbon dioxide acts as a net cooling agent in the upper atmosphere. So cool temperatures relative to the dew point and water vapor are the two things you need to see cloud formation. So understanding these clouds is definitely the, that community is very interested in seeing if these clouds are actually a harbinger of climate change, if they reflect uh, what we what we're observing in this lower atmosphere. And this leads to another wonderful thing, is that this is the most sensitive part of our environment. People think of global climate, they think of a polar bear or something sinking on an iceberg, but that's just an effect of a warming climate. What the direct effects that we have are always first to the atmosphere, and especially the upper atmosphere. That's the most sensitive part of our environment. That's where the solar environment interacts with the terrestrial environment. That's where all this stuff goes on. So, and it's the hardest part to understand. This mesosphere has been termed really the ignored sphere in a lot, because it's been too high to get to by by aircraft or balloon, yet too low to get to by orbiting spacecraft.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're really doing and what we try to instill in the people that are becoming part of PoSSUM to enable the science is say that this mesosphere really is a frontier. We know so little about it except for very brief transits of this, and that this is really something that we want to open up. And these people that are now becoming part of the program, going through the training at Embry-Riddle, are helping to enable the science, learning to bring the data that we're going to build is significantly more complicated, more accurate models of the mesosphere. And they also serve as ambassadors, not just to the program, but to the Aranami community. Most people don't even know the word Aranami, but this is an opportunity to really inspire people to learn more about it and to educate themselves about the mesosphere and the important role this plays within our global climate. So that in a nutshell really is where the program is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a science program. We look to expand this into other aspects of mesospheric observations. But equally as important is that we want to educate people to really communicate what we as a science community are doing, and balance the education public outreach component with the science component. So I think I was about 15 minutes spiel on things. I'd be happy to
No,
share
that's
some photos or so, but probably best just to open this up for some questions.
No, that's excellent. Exactly what you shared with us is very helpful. One of the things that I know a lot of people are interested in knowing is what are some of the challenges that you've encountered in terms of doing your research and your work? Is there anything in particular that you'd share with the community of people who are trying to work their way into those areas in terms of low gravity experiments, or even working in the area that you're working in the mesosphere where it's kind of an uncharted territory? Have there been any challenges in terms of obtaining funding or trying to involve the community more?
That's a good question. Funding is certainly what we all want to know. This community has got wonderful ideas, and as we know, public funds are scarce and scarce. Even though our economy seems to be getting a lot stronger, it doesn't seem
Sure.
to be translating to the public sphere and to science, and this really is a tragedy. But where you find diversity, you can find creative solutions. And with PoSSUM, we look at four possibilities of funding. We stay active with the public funds when the opportunities come through NSF or NASA. But the last cycle, for example, we were invited, and I think selected 3 out of 53 that were invited for a phase 2 proposal. You put 2 months into writing a proposal.
Right.
This is a problem with the way public funds are being done. This is also something that isn't a typical experiment. It's relying on vehicles that are still being developed. It's in a sense it's going to be a great. We think it's pioneering a new a new frontier for science, but it's also a disruptive program because of that. So we don't want to put all our eggs in that one basket. Now, the private fund opportunities, we look to engage directly potential investors through private foundations. We think that the science is very important. So it has not just implications to global climate, it has implications to reentry region for manned vehicles, for comparative planetologists. And so we engage outreach there as well. But also it's a story, and a lot of the people that are proposing science through here not just have the science, but they have a story, and a lot of these stories have human elements. And we found that, like this qualification program at Embry-Riddle, we're just I like to joke about us as being, middle class schmucks. We're scientists and engineers. We don't have huge funding behind this, but this entire program, from the software that runs the simulators to the simulators themselves to the instrumentation, all of that's been done pro bono by people that believe in what we're doing. And there's a lot of people now vested in success, and ultimately that works better because you don't just find providers. You're not just someone's customer. You're building collaboration, and the image of being associated with this is something that we're able to start to sell. So, for people looking at getting their research out there funded, look at not just the hard science, but find a way to communicate it to excite people to invest as sponsors, and also a story. We've had a documentary team that's been following this now for over 2 years. National Geographic and several other media producers have filmed this initial program, and so this kind of snowballs. And these stories have value too. People, this is a human story, and there's layers of the human story. The way people get involved, everyone carries a story, and all of that is of interest to those that want to market the story just for entertainment value, but also for branding, a lot of other things. So there's a lot of tiers of potential funding to this, and then also the fourth way that we like to see is this commercialization element. There are people that want to pay to go to space. They would pay just to be a tourist, but most of these people would resent being just a participant, just a passenger. So we find ways to value add to that experience and help them, really bring in and make them a quote scientist astronaut, and they can have benefits of tax benefits into doing such things, and they're a part of something much bigger than just a tourist experience. We fold them into the program and we make them a part of the team. And a lot of people are very receptive to that idea. So there's a lot of ways to look at this, and we try to work with other groups, bring them into the fold with their research. If it's not directly agronomy or upper atmosphere, we find ways to share our lessons learned and try to provide some horizontal integration with other research groups and do some support. And we'd love to collaborate with more of the community and those in attendance tonight.
Excellent. Thank you very much for all that, Jason. A lot of this is the kind of thing that we're looking to find out more about in the community. And I'd actually like to go ahead and welcome in another one of our panelists tonight. Again, I apologize for all the delays. We were going to introduce everyone in the beginning. But Dr. Joshua Colwell is Professor Associate Chair of Physics at the University of Central Florida. His research interests include studying the origin and the evolution of the solar system. He's the co-investigator on the ultraviolet imaging spectrograph on the Cassini spacecraft and is the director for Center of Microgravity Research at UCF. So, Josh, if we could bring you in, I'd love to hear your experiences in doing microgravity studies and experiments.
Thanks very much. Pleasure to be here. Well, I got into this thing a little bit backwards. Normally what you're supposed to do is start with doing experiments in a lab and then sort of work your way up from that to maybe parabolic flights and drop towers and then beyond that. But the first experiment I ever did was a space shuttle experiment. And then I went from the space shuttle to parabolic flights, and now I've got ground-based labs. Now we're working our way back up into space again. But as you mentioned, the work I do is related to origin and evolution of the solar system. So the research projects that I'm studying are the early stages of planet formation. So these are basic physics experiments where we're looking at the collisional evolution of a collection of particles that are small, that their mutual gravitational interaction is quite weak, and so we are looking at effects that would be swamped in the gravitational environment in a terrestrial lab. So we've been doing experiments on parabolic flights, and we're in the queue to do some automated experiments on initial flights of the commercial suborbital vehicles. And we have a small experiment up on space station operating right now, and we're working on a CubeSat version of that. And so the particular kind of experiment I'm interested in with the NewSpace environment is taking advantage of the microgravity environment. And there are a lot of other aspects of that environment that have different scientific interests. I heard you talking about, I think I heard you mentioning some of the atmospheric studies that can be done in the mesosphere, the sort of upper part of the atmosphere, but not as high up as where station orbits or where shuttle used to orbit. That's been nicknamed the Ignorosphere because rockets tend to go blasting through it on their way to higher altitudes, but it's too high for balloons to sample. In addition, for astronomers such as myself, getting above the atmosphere is quite useful because the Earth's atmosphere is opaque at several wavelengths, at UV and large parts of the infrared part of the spectrum. So there's a whole other branch of scientists who are interested in the NewSpace avenues just to get above the atmosphere so they can take a look at something. So there's a number of different aspects of what we call NewSpace with commercial suborbital that are enabled by those capabilities, microgravity, astronomical observations, in situ measurements of the upper atmosphere and other things as well. So it's very exciting to see the developments that are coming along, and we're happy to be playing a part.
What are some of the things that you've experienced in terms of, putting together an experiment and actually getting it into the point where it can make it into a microgravity type scenario, a flight type scenario? Do you have any advice or any information with what you've experienced so far?
I think as this sort of commercial industry has matured and as more people are getting involved in doing these experiments and sort of smaller scale experiments, that there's a little bit more of a clear path, a clear on-ramp for researchers and experimenters to do that kind of thing. It can be quite daunting. So if you're a researcher, if you have an idea for something you want to fly in any of these various payload avenues, initially it can seem kind of daunting. There are safety issues, there are technical specifications, and there's not really a very clear, all one-stop shopping kind of how-to guide. However, each individual flight provider is now doing, I think, a very good job of saying, here's what we want you to do to fly on our vehicle. So Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin have very clear and helpful payload user guides. Flying with on the reduced gravity payloads is also, on the parabolic flights, airplane flights is also, you get a lot of support from the flight providers. So I've flown both with NASA and with the Zero G Corporation, and they're both very helpful. They want to help you get your payload up and going. They'll say, here's the information we need, and if what you provide is not meeting that, they are very good about working with you. So I think the key thing is figuring out, if you're a new researcher or you're exploring doing something like this, is to figure out what really are your requirements, because there are a number of different vehicles or experiment platforms, from high-altitude balloon to suborbital, commercial suborbital, the manned vehicles that are being developed, NASA's suborbital vehicles, which are a much more violent ride but go up to a much higher altitude, space station, CubeSat, so all these different, and parabolic airplane flights, they all have pros and cons. And so the first thing I think researchers need to figure out is, what is it that I really need in order to do the experiment or have the experience that I'm looking for? Do I need to be in space? If so, how big does my experiment need to be? How long do I need to be there? Or do I just need microgravity? How clean a microgravity environment do I need for that? And so forth. And once you've identified those requirements, that'll lead you naturally to a particular Spaceflight platform or experiment platform, and then you can start working with those providers, and they can help you along the way.
Now, in terms of preparing something, so what can you describe some of the different things that you've put together, some of the projects that you've worked on in terms of preparing them for these experiments?
So, like in terms of what the actual hardware is and what
Yeah.
the experiments are like? Yeah. So
Sure.
my experiments are quite fun. I joke that they're automated dirtball fights. So we are looking at the physical interaction of, as I said before, small particles
Mhm.
in various astrophysical environments. So in a planetary ring system or in the protoplanetary disk. So what we do is we simulate a patch of that by taking a collection of particles, putting them in a vacuum to have the same conditions that they would have in the space environment that we're simulating, and they're just mechanical experiments. So we'll shake a particle sample, for example, and then capture video of it. We've done collision experiments where we throw two aggregates, loosely bound aggregates of material at each other at very low velocities and see whether they fragment, do they stick, do they rebound, if they rebound at what velocity. All of our data is usually video data. Generally, we try to capture that at a high frame rate so that we can get more data. So up to 500 frames per second for some of our experiments. And the mechanical challenge for our experiments is getting the particles to move slowly enough. So we're doing things at very, very gentle collisions. Mm-hmm. If you drop a particle on the surface of the Earth from a height of just 2 inches, it will hit the ground at 1 meter per second. The speeds that we're exploring are down around 10 centimeters per second, so 10 times slower than that, down to a millimeter per second, so another 100 times slower than that. And that is so slow that a particle moving at, say, a millimeter per second would only, on the surface of the Earth at 1 g, would only move a micron, or a millionth of a meter. So it's completely swamped by the Earth's gravity. So one of our technical challenges is just making things that are strong enough to survive the rigors of launch or being shipped across country to wherever you're going to do the experiment, and then able to sort of gently push our particle samples around at these very low speeds. We do have at our website, which is microgravity.physics.ucf.edu, and our YouTube channel, which is UCF Microgravity. We have some videos of some of these microgravity experiments that we've done, including from space station and from parabolic flights. So those can be viewed by anybody on YouTube, again, at the UCF Microgravity channel on YouTube.
Oh, great. It's good to have that channel, because a lot of times it's just a matter of wanting to see some of the things that other people have done. Because one of the biggest things that I think all of us wonder about is, it's one thing to design an experiment and design a study that's going to be done in 1G on Earth. We all know the challenges just inherent to that. I work with human studies type work with usability studies and going through IRB and all of those processes. So it's interesting to kind of find out what are the unique challenges that you've dealt with. Right. So to be able to see some of the things that you've set up is fascinating. One of the areas I'm looking to do is some usability studies for things like using user interfaces on Google Glass, for example, in microgravity, and trying to come up with some scenarios that might be useful for people in microgravity environments. So trying to get a feel for some of those challenges is extremely helpful. We do have a lot of folks that are doing aeromedical style studies, and so quite a bit of what I'm hearing kind of ties in towards some of the things that they would experience. And Jason, do you have anything in terms of studies that you've done that might tie in as well, experiences to bring in, or challenges you've faced up against?
Well, Tanya, that was, the challenges are pretty much, we're kind of creating this industry together, and I think we're all very tied into the the perception of the science that we do, as well as the vehicle, everything's the vehicle providers. A lot of this is in transition. We're moving from a time of sounding rockets and ground observations and big expensive satellites, and we're moving to a new era of CubeSats and NewSpace vehicles. We're kind of all in this together. The challenges are generally specific. I think a lot of the challenges on our own program are finding ways to expand it to be able to do the breadth of science that we really see that we need to do, and that's probably very similar to a lot of people are facing. But I think by being able to share our lessons learned and work with people, as Dr. Colwell said, every one of these experiences is kind of a boutique experience, but there are some similar things in common, and we can cross-pollinate. We can work together to try to streamline these processes, even though the experimentation can be very disparate indeed. It's certainly a process that we're maturing together.
Yeah, I think one of the exciting things, as you were just mentioning, is that there are so many different kinds of science and areas of investigation, and not just science, but educational and outreach opportunities that people are exploring with new space capabilities, bringing K-12 students in, getting university students more actively involved hands-on with developing experiments. So it's a very, very broad array or spectrum of investigations that are enabled by the new capabilities with NewSpace. And you were mentioning earlier, one of the big challenges, of course, is getting the resources to do things. And we're in a little bit of a mode where we're sort of trying to pick ourselves up by our own bootstraps, where the resources come once you're flying and you're producing results, but you can't fly and produce results until you have those resources. So it's a little bit of a difficult birthing pains or transition right now as we get this new industry going. And I know that all of us out here doing these kinds of research projects are finding different ways to get experiments up there and show capabilities that are enabled by some of the new flight platforms, and then hopefully that will bring more people in and then bring more resources in and more capabilities.
Well, this is great. I really appreciate everything that the both of you have been able to share with us. Unfortunately, we were originally going to also have Dr. Stephen Collicott on as well, but he was going to be joining us by phone, and we've been having some trouble with that. But what I'd like to do is just first of all, thank you both for sharing your experiences and sharing some of the things that you've dealt with. And I'd also like to let everyone know, hopefully between now and the next webinar, I'll be able to work out some of the technical issues that we ran into. But all of these webinars are leading up ultimately to the NewSpace Researchers Workshop, which is going to be held on 4 May 2015. It'll be held in League City, Texas, just outside of Houston. And the reason behind these webinars is to try to get folks interested and to get them information about how to actually achieve being able to accomplish some suborbital research. We were happy to have you both here tonight. I'm hoping to maybe get Dr. Collicott on the next call. I just wanted to mention that the next two webinars are going to be held. The first one will be held on 12 March 2015 at 2000 Eastern Standard Time, and that will focus on developing flight-ready technologies. The panelists that we have planned for that evening are Steve Ord of the NASA Flight Opportunities Program and Ted Southern of Final Frontier Design. The third webinar is going to focus on educational opportunities, and that will be held on 2 April 2015, also at 2000 Eastern Standard Time. The panelists for that event are planned to be Stephen Heck of the ARIT STEAM project and Edward Wright of the Citizens in Space. So we hope that everyone will join us. Hopefully we'll be able to get all of our original intended viewers as well. And I thank everyone for their patience who is listening this evening. And we will try to work out some of our difficulties and look forward to seeing everyone hopefully on 12 March. We will get the invitations out to you the next day or so. And I think we've learned a lot from our first webinar, and we'll be able to do an even better, more exciting scenario next time. But we invite everyone to that, including our panelists, and we'd love to see you again in our session. And thank you both very much again for giving up your time this evening and for working through our difficulties so that we can get this together and hopefully be able to share this. This is being broadcast on YouTube as well. So folks will be able to see this even after the broadcast is over. So again, I'd like to thank everyone and wish everyone a good evening and a good weekend.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya.